In 1992, a kid from Vancouver moved across the continent to Orono, Maine to play hockey. He was young. He wouldn't even turn 18 until October. His name was Paul Kariya, and he was probably the best college hockey player of all time. Incredible speed, skill, and hockey sense allowed him to play beyond his small frame, racking up an unbelievable 100 points in just 39 games for the University of Maine as a freshman. This stunning campaign earned Kariya the Hobey Baker Award as college hockey's best player, an award never before won by a freshman, an achievement that wouldn't be equaled for another 22 years. His size still held him back as an NHL prospect, though, and he sat well behind sure-thing superstar Alexander Daig in the public eye going into the 1993 draft. The 6-foot-tall Daig was the only guy at the top of the 93 draft even remotely Kariya's size of 5'10", with 6'2" Rob Niedermeyer being the next shortest. Kariya fell to number 4, with Daig, Chris Pronger, and Chris Gratton going ahead of him. While not the first pick of the 93 draft, Kariya was the first ever pick for his franchise, Disney's own Mighty Ducks of Anaheim. Kariya didn't play immediately for the Ducks, splitting the 93-94 season between Maine and Canada's national team, but he joined Anaheim in the lockout-shortened 1995 season, donning the number 9. Goaltender and shockingly not French Guy Hebert said to The Athletic's Eric Stevens years later that the team was told that number 9 was saved for Paul, despite Paul himself saying he didn't care much about numbers. Kariya was immediately Anaheim's best player. Unfortunately, being the best player on that team wasn't saying very much, as the fledgling Ducks were not good at all. It was his sophomore year where it all came together for the young star, going from the best player on a crappy team to a top 10 player in the league.
Ducks steal it here, shot, score! Paul Kariya! Number 50! First time in franchise history!
Kariya's 50 goals and 108 points were obviously first on the Ducks. What's surprising is the margin by which they were first. Second on the team in both categories was Steve Ruchin, with 19 goals and 44 points. What can't go unmentioned is the Ducks' major midseason addition, another offensive juggernaut wing, Teemu Selanne.
Whenever he gets knocked over, here he is and he scores! Teemu Selanne with the quick backhand.
Kariya scored 44 of his points in the just 29 games following the Finnish Flash's Duck debut. While the 96 season wasn't great for the Ducks as a team, they now had two extremely dynamic offensive players, Kariya on the left wing and Selanne on the right. I can only imagine how happy Steve Ruchin was to be the Ducks' only good center. The pair were monstrous together in 1997, putting up tremendous numbers, leading the Ducks to the postseason for the first time, and, subsequently, their first series win against Selanne's kinda former team, the freshly moved Phoenix Coyotes.
Oh, there is no bigger thrill. Oh, there it is! Kariya wins it in overtime! Just blasted it by Hobby Bull, and there will be a 7th game in Anaheim!
Kariya didn't play all 82, missing a big chunk of games with an incessant abdominal strain at the start of the year, and then a couple more with a concussion he received courtesy of Matthew Schneider's elbow. Video of this specific hit has been lost to time, but it was apparently blatant enough for the NHL to hand the Leafs D-man a 2-game suspension. A suspension that Kariya said wasn't long enough. Even missing those games, Kariya finished with 99 points in just 69 games, earning him a second-place finish in MVP voting, losing out on the award only because the best goalie of all time was going absolutely psycho mode in Buffalo. Some issues did arise between the two-time Lady Byng winner and the Ducks, with the two sides unable to come to an agreement on a new contract. With Kariya ineligible for salary arbitration, holding out was his only option if he thought his pay was unfair. The ever-disciplined Kariya practiced with the Canadian national team, just preparing for the Olympics and waiting. Resolution came in December, with Kariya signing a new 2-year deal, with the money for the games he sat out going to charity. Selanne, who had been unsuccessfully trying to drag the Ducks forward, called the signing the greatest Christmas present ever in an AP article on the subject. In the same article, Kariya said, "I just felt it was time." Kariya was molten hot when he came back, lighting up the opposition with 15 goals and 29 points through 21 games. The Ducks continued to lose hockey games, but their superstar and franchise face was back and better than ever. You might be saying, yeah, I know Paul Kariya, he's cool. Why are we doing a fairly surface-level rehash of his Hall of Fame career? I'll be honest with you. Paul isn't the main character of this story. He's an important piece, of course, the protagonist even. But this story isn't about the hero. It's about the villains. And we're about to meet one of them. This is The Most Hated. Kariya's 22nd game of the season came against the Blackhawks on February 1st. But we need to go back, because while the Ducks captain was figuring out his contract, his team was building a blood feud with Chicago. The two teams' first meeting of the season came on November 19th of 1997. The thing with the Ducks was, aside from their top-end talent, they were a bit of a goon squad, headlined by forwards Warren Reichel and Mark Janssens, and defensemen Dave Karpa and Jason Marshall. This isn't to say the Hawks were angels either, with their main enforcer Jim Cummins and captain Chris Chelios not exactly known as clean players. The November game was a mess, mostly hinging around Marshall, who fought Jean-Yves Leroux 2 minutes into the game, then got thrown out with an instigator penalty in the final 2 minutes when he jumped Chelios. Once again, the Hawks weren't innocent, with their top-line center Alexei Zhamnov earning a 5 and a 10 for a slash. Kariya was back for the team's second contest, 3 days after Christmas. This time, the Hawks started the hostility. 5 minutes in, Jim Cummins tangled with the Ducks' Mark Janssens, baiting Janssens to drop his gloves. Then, Cummins didn't drop his gloves. Instead, he waited for a confused Janssens to lean over to pick up his gloves off the ice and sucker punch the Duck as he was standing up. Nasty, nasty stuff earned Cummins a 10-minute misconduct, but he probably should have been tossed. The rest of the matchup wasn't as extreme, but the bad blood was still very present. The stage was set for someone to go too far. Now back to the February 1st meeting, and as expected, it's violent almost immediately, with fights between Ethan Morrow and Dave Karpa and Reed Simpson and Mark Janssens in the game's first minute. Some hockey got played, with Chicago taking the lead, but Kariya tied it with his 16th goal of the year. But just under 2 minutes later, the Hawks took the lead back. It's Kariya again who tied the game with his 17th and final goal of the season. Because after he scored, this happened.
For the puck. Oh, man! Well, that's twice as bad as I thought it was. That was a cross-check to the chin and the neck.
Who was that? Was that Cummins? Was it known cheap shot artist Chelios? It was neither. It was a player with a strange legacy. Not one cut and dry as a goon, but a great talent with a vicious history. Paul Kariya had taken a cross-check in the face from Gary Suter. Gary Suter is an enigma. In the 1980s, he was a sparkling offensive defenseman, putting together a borderline Hall of Fame case. In 1986, he won the Calder Trophy. He won a Stanley Cup with a monstrous Flame squad in 1989 as the number 2 blue liner to Hall of Famer Al McInnes. He never led his team in penalty minutes, or frankly was even all that close. Suter is no goon, yet he is the artist behind some of hockey's ugliest plays. In the 1987 Canada Cup, he two-handed Soviet forward Andrei Lomakin in the face. In 1991, at the next Canada Cup, Suter ended Wayne Gretzky's prime, smashing him, a man that already had back problems, into the boards from behind, knocking the Great One out of the tournament.
He's skating out toward the center of the ice shedding equipment as he goes.
Suter's recklessness came to a head in the 1996 playoffs against Colorado, where he boarded Scott Young and, what do you know, cross-checked Adam Deadmarsh in the face. Suter may not have been your typical brawler or enforcer, but he was a dangerous player. The rest of the Ducks-Hawks game was chaos, a bloodbath. Anaheim's Ted Drury tried to get revenge with a dangerous hit of his own on LaRue. Ruslan Saleh headbutted Chicago's Sergei Krivokrasov in a third-period brawl. The Ducks went to the league. From the LA Times, Elliot Tiefer asked if he planned to have a videotape of the play sent to the league office. Duck president Tony Tavares said, "You bet your expletive. We can't get it there fast enough. I'm thinking about sending somebody on a plane to New York with it." From the Chicago Tribune, "How that doesn't get called is beyond my comprehension," Tavares said. Defending himself in the same article, Suter said there was a wild scramble in front of the net, and I turned around and saw a duck, Kariya. Must have crouched down because I didn't hit him that high. I'm guilty of cross-checking, if anything. Yeah, okay man, sure. Brian Burke, head of the league's hockey operations, saw the play differently, handing Suter a 4-game suspension. The Ducks brass fell silent as the gravity of Kariya's injury became apparent. The only real statement out of Anaheim in response to the suspension was a weird quote from Solani to the LA Times' Elliot Tiefer. "Now we'll see how tough he is. If he's tough, he'll play. Of course he has to be smart too. I think he's going to play. He doesn't know himself yet. He holds the ball in his hands right now." When asked his opinion of the play, Solani said, "I don't think Suter was trying to hurt anybody. It seemed to me that Paul had already scored. It looked dirty. Since he was cross-checked in the face and because he was injured, those two were things that make it different." That's a weird thing to say, Teemu. But in all fairness, the true danger of concussions wasn't known in those days, especially not by the players, and there's probably a bit of a language barrier at play here. The Hawks were significantly less mum on the subject, speaking their mind in one of the most Homerish articles I've ever read from the Chicago Tribune. From that write-up, one of the guys said before Tuesday's game, if Kariya would have cross-checked me, I might have only gotten 2 games, said Suter, who thought the suspension was a bit harsh since he doesn't have a reputation of being a dirty player. Plus, he didn't intend to injure Kariya. Doesn't have a reputation as a dirty player? I think this is Suter himself implying this, to which I would respond, yeah, you do, man. The NHL has a history of inconsistency. That's true. But how do you knock a guy out with a cross-check to the head and think, actually, the real victim is me? Chelios complained about inconsistency. Eric Weinrich said, oh, we didn't send it into the league when they jumped Chelios in that first game. How do you think these are the same thing, Eric? Kariya was done for the year. In his absence, Canada went without a medal at the Nagano Olympics. He did resurge the next season, but he wasn't the superstar he had been before the hit to the head. The Ducks had all these enforcers, but they didn't protect Kariya. All they did was light the fire their captain was eventually caught up in. The Ducks weren't very good with Kariya being merely great as opposed to generational. Solani left via trade to the Sharks, joining new teammate Gary Suter in San Jose, and leaving Kariya with just Ruchin, who himself was struggling with post-concussion syndrome. Finally, in 2003, Kariya got some help. Rookie coach Mike Babcock and goal-scoring winger Peter Sikora joined Kariya and young goalie J.S. Jaguar's pads to lead the Ducks back to the playoffs. The Ducks allowed just 6 goals in 4 games as they swept the NHL's top-scoring team, the Detroit Red Wings, in round 1. The Stars put up more of a fight in round 2, but they couldn't recover from a 60-save performance from Jaguar in game 1 and a Sikora goal in quintuple overtime.
Leclerc in by Hatcher, centered by own shot, score! There it is!
The Wild in the conference finals were the Ducks' most outmatched opponent yet. Minnesota managed one goal through 4 games as they were completely stonewalled by Jaguar, who finished the series with a .992 save percentage.
In, alone, gather it! Oh, what difference does it make? It's Jaguar.
It's against the Devils in the Stanley Cup Final where we meet our other central figure. There wasn't a big buildup of hatred between these two teams on opposite sides of the country. In fact, they probably liked each other more than most pairings would, for the sole fact that the Niedermeyer brothers were split across the teams, with Scott a Devil and Rob a Mighty Duck. The home team ruled through the first 5 games, and the Ducks took the lead early in Game 6 in their effort to send the series back to New Jersey. Midway through the second, a man burned himself into the hearts of Ducks fans forever.
He moves it. Oh, guys, that's interference.
This is Scott Stevens, a brutal but talented defenseman and the captain of the Devils. Unlike Suter, whose ghastly hits interrupted a great career, Stevens had built his Hall of Fame career out of those hits. Stevens was a great offensive producer in the 80s and early 90s, but through it all, physicality was the hallmark of his game. Stevens' whole career, he picked people's heads. While Suter's transgressions were often emotion-driven, Stevens injured players with cold cruelty. There wasn't any emotion about it. He wasn't out to hurt other guys because he didn't like them. Scott Stevens wanted to hurt opposing players to help his team win. In the 2000 playoffs, he laid a crushing hit on Eric Lindros, putting one of the final nails in the Flyer superstar's career. Stevens didn't like that Lindros was severely injured, but he wasn't remorseful about the hit itself. He didn't want to cost Lindros years off his career. Stevens had no hatred for the man once touted as the next one. The Devils' captain just wanted his team to win, and hitting Lindros as violently as possible would help them do that. Same story for Stevens the next year, leaping into Ron Francis's head in a series between the Devils and Hurricanes, abruptly ending Ronnie Franchise's season with a concussion. The second one Stevens had handed out in as many games. The sequence of Francis trying to get off the ice is genuinely horrific. Sammy Kapanen got lucky that it wasn't 3 concussions in 3 games. Stevens obliterated him in Game 4, but missed his head. Midway through Game 6 against Anaheim, Stevens had done it again. The hit was late and directly to the head of a player looking in a different direction. Kariya exhibited the signs of brain trauma, but out he came back onto the ice.
Near side Kariya. Kariya, the fans want one.
It's an incredible moment, a beautiful triumph for Kariya against all odds. It's a moment that becomes horrifying when you hear that Kariya doesn't remember it at all. Even with Kariya, the Ducks lost Game 7 in New Jersey. Later it would be revealed that Kariya had a separated shoulder to go with the concussion he denied at the time. The bad guys won, and that was it for Kariya in Anaheim. Kariya had a few more years left in the league before Patrick Coletta gave him his last concussion with a chicken wing to the head. Kariya lost massive amounts of brain function from all the damage, and we'll never know how much. Luckily, with the help of doctors, Paul got most of that function back. Kariya was bitter for a long time toward a sport that he had given everything, but that had failed to protect him and many others again and again. Kariya lives a happy life now. He loves to surf and spend time with his and his partner's little Maltese, Wyatt. He's forgiven hockey and finally allowed his number to be put up in the rafters of Honda Center beside his friend Solani's. According to Eric Stevens' piece on jersey retirement, Kariya didn't think he deserved the honor because he never won a cup with the team. Gary Suter and Scott Stevens aren't bad people, as far as I know. They didn't know what damage they were causing, but they were reckless. They deserved more substantial punishment from the league. I didn't make this series because I have an axe to grind against specific players. I did it to try to understand each fan base's hatred and make my own judgment and let you, the viewer, do the same. 2 hits changed the course of a franchise forever and permanently enshrined Gary Suter and Scott Stevens as Anaheim's most hated.
And thank you for making tonight the most memorable night of my life. Thank you very much.